Beautiful.
You look good. You look the best. Thank you. You all look good. All right. All right. So today I'm going to be giving you guys a training session on chainsaws and the fire service. So first, you guys know me. My name is Adam Burnett. I want to give you guys a little quick background of my experiences with chainsaws. So I've worked on a state of Alaska wildland firefighting crew now for 4 years. And so we heavily use chainsaws as one of our main tools to fight wildland fires. And one of the things that being on the crew has given me is the S212 certification, which is a certification necessary to have in order to use a chainsaw on a wildland fire incident, as well as being a structure firefighter. Along with my Firefighter 1 certification, we use chainsaws for tasks such as vertical ventilation. So while two different jobs and applications, both of them include using a chainsaw. So in this training, I'm going to be introducing you guys on different chainsaw components. I'm going to be talking about adjustments, some maintenance, and some troubleshooting, and then we're going to wrap up with a little bit of safety and a video I have for you. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to talk about is saw chain. And specifically, when you're choosing your chain, you have to know what kind of job you're going to be using the saw for. So there's two main types of chain. There's wood cutting chain and there's carbide chain. So in structure firefighting, the type of chain that we most commonly are going to have on our saws is carbide, because we're going to be cutting into buildings, and buildings aren't just made out of wood, they have nails and screws in them, siding, metal siding sometimes. So we need a chain that is going to be stronger to be able to rip through this material, whereas a wood cutting chain is a softer metal and it cuts through wood quicker. While you can use a carbide chain on wood, you'll see that it is much slower and it has more of a ripping action than a cutting action. I'm going to hand this to you guys, and I want you guys to compare the two chains and see the differences. Here is a wood cutting chain, and here is a carbide chain. So as you guys are looking at that, I'm going to be explaining some chain parts. So you have the cutter, which is commonly known as a tooth. So that is what's actually doing the action, cutting into the material. And it's sharp, obviously. Then you have the tie strap. And the tie strap is what holds each of these links together. So it's the middle piece. Then you have the drive link, which is the bottom piece, this piece. This is what fits in the rail, which we'll discuss in a moment. And you finally have the master link, is where the chain is completed into the circular formation that you see. So here, I'll identify on this illustration the parts that I just talked about. So you have the cutter, one for the right side and one for the left side. The tie strap, which is this middle link, and your drive link, which is shown here. So along with the chain parts, there are three different types. You have your standard, semi-skip, and full skip, or just called skip. And see if you can identify what type of chain that is after I explain it. So standard, you have a tie link between each cutter. In a semi-skip, you have two, a cutter, a tie link, and then a cutter, then two, and you can see the pattern will continue. Where in a full skip, there's two between each cutter. And the benefits of this is this type of chain is much more dangerous to use because it has a more powerful cutting speed, and you have a higher power kickback, whereas your standard It's slower cutting and more safe to use. Alright, so now let's talk about the guide bar, or also known as the rails. So we normally just refer to this part as the bar, and this is what the chain rides on. So it fits in this groove, and it spins around right back into the saw. While I have these two saws up here, this is the power head, and this would be the saw with the bar attachment. So this is just, when the saw looks like this is what we just refer to as the power head. On the bar, there are these little holes which feed the oil into the chain to lubricate it, because as you can imagine, that metal moving that quickly creates a lot of friction. There's two different types of bars. The bars that we have sprockets in the nose, and this sprocket just helps aid reducing that friction, help the chain move more freely, versus a bar without one called a solid nose bar. So next, we're going to be talking about the bar studs. The bar studs are right here. This is what allows the bar nuts to screw onto and secure the faceplate holding down the bar to the power head. The next few parts that I'm going to identify are pretty simple and self-explanatory. So the chain tensioner is this component right here. It is maneuvered by your scrunch with a lefty righty motion, and as you move to the right, you are tightening, you're moving the guide bar away from the power head, thus tightening the chain. So we call that the... Good. Alright, we're back from the interruption. So before we left, we were talking about the chain tension adjustment screw. So just to recap it, here is the screw that moves this bar. So as you tighten it, it moves this prong, which you can see right here, which is conveniently fitted onto your bar. So you can see how it slides into that hole. So as you move this screw, like I said before, it pushes your guide bar away from your power head, thus tightening your chain. And so in a later section we'll talk about maintaining your proper chain tension. Moving on. The chain sprocket is located here, outside of the clutch drum. This is what the drive links on the chain fit into, and this is how the engine can power the chain forward. So without the sprocket, your engine wouldn't be able to drive your chain, and your chain wouldn't move at all. There's different size sprockets. This is a 7, so you have 7, 8. The larger the sprocket, the more room you have for your chain as it gets stretched out from cutting. So the longer you can extend the life of the chain. Alright, so one of the major safety components of all chainsaws is the chain brake, which is this lever here. So it has two movements. You pull back to disengage, you push forward to engage, and you can hear that audible click. That's it. That's this metal bar snapping on the clutch drum. And by clamping onto the clutch drum, it stops the sprocket from spinning the chain. So you can very fastly stop your chain. It's also conveniently placed on the saw to allow it to manually be activated in situations where the saw is knocked towards your body. So as I'm cutting, if I have bad cutting technique and I get a strong kickback from cutting with the tip of my saw, the saw is going to move backwards towards my my body, and hopefully before it hits me, by having my hand in front of that chain brake, it'll activate it, stopping the chain before contact with the button. So it's a very important safety component of the saw. So as I was mentioning, the chain brake engages on the clutch. This silver part here is called the clutch drum, and it sits over the clutch. And what holds down the clutch drum is what we call a E-clip. So if you look in here, this little clip there that's on top of that washer, it looks like the shape of an E. So that's how it got its name, E-clip. They're pretty difficult to get off. You use your tool and you just push it off. The big thing is trying not to lose it, especially when you're out in the woods, and especially here in Alaska, that very thick tundra layer has lots of spots for that clip to hide. And once that clip is off, you can take the washer, the sprocket off, and your clutch drum, as I've illustrated here, which exposes your clutch. And the job of the clutch is to allow the engine to idle and the chain not spin and not be engaged. So once you engage your throttle to a certain RPM, that clutch is going to engage, spinning, giving power to your sprocket, giving power to your chain. On your faceplate, this plastic rubber component here is called the chain catcher, also known as the mud flap, because it resembles what a mud flap looks like. And this is just a simple design to help take the impact in the scenarios that your chain becomes off your bar. And so it's going to whip down most likely and hit this mud flap, taking some of the resistance before impacting your body. So the starter grip, pretty self-explanatory component. It's what you grab on in order to start the saw. On this chainsaw, the starter grip has a nice D-shaped handle with plenty of room for your hand to get in there and grip it strongly when you have a thick glove on, like we most likely will. The dogs, if I may see that. The dogs is this metal part located on the faceplate, and the function of the dogs, also known as bumper spikes, is to help the saw lock into materials that you're cutting, and it helps steady it. They are also kind of pose a hazard because of how sharp they are. Next, simple component here, the front handlebar is on top of the saw. That's what we refer to as front handlebar. On this saw, it has what we call a full grip handle, because there's a grip 360 degrees around the saw, giving you the ability to hold the saw in all different directions, which is important when you're falling large trees. The gunning sights are these black lines that run across the saw. And the gunning sights are used to plan the direction of your cuts in the trees. So when you're in there cutting a tree, you're going along, you line up these sights with the path that you want to put that tree. And if you line up your cuts well, where this line projects out is where that path of the tree will take. So they run on both sides, and they're here shown on the faceplate. The rear handle, that's how you hold your right hand. The saw. It also contains the throttle and the interlock. So the throttle trigger is what you use to speed up your RPM or your engine. The oiler adjustment screw, do you guys know where that's located?
On the bottom.
On the bottom, that's right. So the oiler adjustment screw is inferior on the power head. It's located here. In order to make this adjustment, you use your tuning driver, and you would insert it here, and you would rotate it to the right to increase the amount of oil you want to be given, and you would turn it to the left to decrease the amount of oil you would want. It's important that the saw does not run out of oil before it runs out of fuel. In a perfect situation, you would run out of both fluids at the same time. And we'll touch on that more later. The throttle interlock is this right here, this fin on the rear handle. You cannot pull the trigger without engaging the throttle interlock beforehand. Very intuitive. The on-off switch is located near the rear handle here on the back, conveniently placed so that you can quickly turn on and off the saw with your thumb. In the most superior position is the off. One click down is run. The choke. The choke is important when you're first starting the saw and it's cold. The choke allows different air-fuel ratios to help the saw start. All the way down is full choke, allowing a lot of air in. Half choke is the third click down. It's also very easy to flood the saw if you pull it too many times on full choke, which you guys are familiar with. So the air filter cover is what's used to protect the air filter as well as the carburetor. It's a hard plastic covering. It easily unscrews and exposes the air filter. So the air filter is a basically important protective barrier for the engine, especially when you're cutting these materials and shredding them into fine aerosols. You don't want that stuff going into your engine because it will quickly destroy it. So the air filter is very important, and we'll talk more about maintaining it. The fuel filter is located inside of the fuel tank. It's a little hard to demonstrate because the saw has fuel in it. I did my best to try and take a picture. That's a good illustration of what it looks like, and it's outlined down there in the tank, right there. So I know it's hard to see, but similar to the air filter, the fuel filter is to help catch debris from going into the fuel lines that feed the engine. The oil and fuel caps, very self-explanatory function. They prevent your fuel and oil from spilling out. What you may not have known is that on these caps are these holes. Can you see those? So
Yes.
Those holes are designed to allow, it's like a ventilation system. So as the environmental temperature increases, vapors expand the hotter they get. So this allows pressure to release instead of building, so you don't have that cap blow off. Still, in extreme temperatures, when you crack that cap, you should have eye protection on, or at least look away, because you're likely to get those vapors to come out quickly. The muffler's job, just like on all engines, is to reduce the noise of the engine. And if you notice a difference in the engine tone, it becomes more excessively loud. One of the things you should look at is to see if these muffler screws are tight using a Torx wrench. Another important part that has a big function is a spark plug located superior to your air filter. The spark plug is what ignites the fuel so the engine can run. The decompression valve, which is on top of the power head, this blue little switch. This reduces the resistance in the cylinder, which makes it easier to start the machine, and is also a device to help prolong the life of the saw. So that was a quick overview of the major components of the chainsaw. Is there anything I can clarify or any questions that you have on the components of the saw?
Talking about sprocket size, is there any advantage to having a smaller one versus a bigger one?
Right. So with a new chain, you're obviously going to have a smaller sprocket, because if you think back to how the chain tensioner is designed, it only has so far that it can go. And so with a new chain, it's relatively short because it hasn't been stretched out, so you're going to have that smaller sprocket. As far as the difference between how fast the revolutions that chain can go around that sprocket, it's not that big of an impact to the saw. But certainly it's important to carry different size sprockets to try and prolong the life of that chain. Good question. So next we're going to move into the adjustments aspect of chainsaws. And there's three adjustments that are for the carburetor of the saw. You have your idle speed, your high and low adjustments. These can't be messed with or adjusted in the field to high and low because wrongly adjusting them can severely damage the saw very quickly. The only way you can properly make the high and low speed adjustments is by having a meter that reads the revolutions per minute. However, it's still important to know that the idle speed adjustment can be adjusted in the field. And what the idle speed adjustment does is determine what the speed of the saw is at idle. So if you're ever holding a saw and it's idling and you notice that the chain is freely spinning without you engaging the throttle, that means that the high idle speed is too high. So you can easily get your tuning driver and lower that to where the chain is not spinning while the saw is idling. And that's just a safety feature because it's not safe to have a spinning chain while you're not cutting things. So now we're going to talk about some troubleshooting, specifically troubleshooting why the saw will not start. So what is the first thing you think of when you're trying to start a chainsaw and it's not starting? If I just gave you the saw, I told you to pull it over, and you're pulling it over for a few minutes, it's not starting, what's the first thing that you think of?
The switch is in the off position.
Exactly. The first thing you should check if you cannot start the saw is to make sure that it's in the run position. The saw will not start if it's in the off position. Beyond that, you can follow this flow chart that I've given you to further diagnose probable causes of why the engine won't start. So if you have the run switch on and you haven't flooded the saw and it still won't start, you could double check that you still have fuel in the saw. Without any fuel, you're not going to be able to, the engine will not be able to run. If you have fuel in there and it still will not start, you could either have issues with the spark plug or you may have bad fuel. Are there any questions on that flow chart or anything I can clarify?
As far as like the air filter, will it so if it's like really dirty, that's when like it's gonna be a problem, not
Yes.
like if it's a little.
Yep. If you obstruct the air into the engine, it will not run. If you're doing heavy cutting, particularly wood, it gets very clogged and dirty, and so if you do not frequently clean that off, you'll notice the saw begins to run very poorly, and it may not even start. So it's another step that you could check to see if your air filter is clean of any debris. Good point. So that sums up troubleshooting. Let's talk about some chainsaw maintenance. Just like anything we do, we always try and maintain it to the best of our ability to try and prolong the life. I already talked about some specific things with the chain. But another thing is on your guide bar, as you use this, it begins to wear, and you can develop what we call burrs. So if you can imagine that you're looking down this bar, this is what you would see. So obviously this is all correct, the tie straps are equal, there's nothing wrong with the integrity of the rails. Here you can see how they outwardly begin to bend, and that's going to happen just by using the chain, or by using the saw. It's normal wear and it can easily be maintained. So as you develop this outward bend in the rails of the bar, which we call burrs, you can smooth them out using a flat file. So, and you can feel them with your fingers. This bar doesn't have any burrs. You can feel that it's smooth. If it had burrs, you'd feel your finger kind of catch on a piece of metal. So you would take your flat file and you would just run it down the lengths of the rails and smooth it out. It's important that there's not burrs, because as you cut, those burrs are going to catch on the material that you're cutting and slow down your cut. Another chainsaw maintenance thing that we do is in regards to chain tension. So we already talked about the component of how your chain tension works, but it's important that you have your chain properly tightened to your saw so you can avoid wear and tear and excessive use of the chain. So the standard procedure for tightening or loosening your chain is first disengage your chain brake. Make sure that you can freely move the chain on the bar, which I can't. It would be a good time to check the tightness so you can get your baseline. So this one is too tight, and I can tell by the rule of thumb that I cannot see 3 drive links, which, if you remember the component on the chain, these bottom teeth looking things, those are called the drive links. If you cannot easily, with a little bit of tension, pull 3 of those off of the rails on the bar, then the chain's too tight. Additionally, you can also audibly hear a chain that is too tight on the saw because it has a very high whine sound. The way I image it is it sounds like it's being resisted. You'll even visibly see the chain quickly comes to a stop when you let off the throttle. That means it's on too tight. So continuing with the steps, chain brake off, loosen your bar nuts to the point where you can loosen them with your hands. There's 2 ways you can have the saw, either on its side and hold pressure on the tip, keeping it even, or you can leave the saw down like this and tighten the chain or loosen the chain from this angle. So when you have the bar nuts loose, you would take your scrunch, put it on the screw, and either adjust it to the right to tighten it or adjust it to the left to loosen it. And then you would simply just check to see how far you can pull it off the bar. If it's the right distance, you would tighten your bar nuts back up and you're good to go. So as I mentioned, the air filter is a very important protection feature of chainsaws. It's also one of the things that we need to maintain in order to improve the condition the saw runs in. So if you're excessively using it, you're going to want to, at appropriate time, clean this air filter, and it can simply be done by taking it and beating it on something. So if you're going to take the air filter off, make sure that you put your chainsaw in full choke to protect the carburetor, because once you remove the air filter, you're removing the protection barrier for the carburetor. So by putting it in full choke, the butterfly valve on the carburetor moves down into the down position, which is just another way to help protect things from getting into the carburetor and then into the engine. So you have your air filter off the saw, you would just beat it on your body, blow into it, try and get all visible debris out of it, place it back on, and you should be good to go. It is not rocket science, I guess is the easiest way to say it. One important thing to note is that using high compressed air can ruin the filter and cause damage that can then, it ruins the integrity, which decreases its protection level for the carburetor and thus the saw. So, chainsaw safety, it's a big thing I want to stress because these tools are so dangerous. And I want you guys to think about this as like holding a gun, because you can easily hurt somebody very seriously. So here at our department, we have our safety and health SOP, which we're all familiar with. And the big component that relates to chainsaw use is the personal protective equipment required when operating these. So what's required is full turnout gear, which, what does full turnout gear mean?
Coat, pants,
Coat,
gloves,
pants,
helmet,
gloves, helmet,
boots.
boots. In addition to our turnout gear, we need to protect our ears and we need to protect our eyes in the ability situations that we can do so. Alright, so to kind of drive home the safety and the dangers of chainsaws, I want to show this quick video, and we're just going to watch a portion of it. So what this video is demonstrating for me is something I can't do here in the kitchen, and that's how easily a chainsaw can cut through our turnout gear, which is the thing that's required for us to wear when operating chainsaws. So although you're wearing that personal protective equipment, when it comes to chainsaws, it's not adequate enough to protect you from the injuries that these machines can cause. Without any resistance, that chainsaw was able to cut completely through the turnout gear. Turnout gear isn't designed to stop a chainsaw. The one personal protective equipment that is chaps. So take a look at the comparison to a chainsaw cutting into chaps than a chainsaw cutting into turnout gear. Right, so clearly there is a humongous difference. The saw was not able to proceed through that log and cut through the pants. It was almost instantly stopped. And that's due to the design of chaps with the Kevlar fibers in there that come into the saw and bind up in the sprocket. And if you stop the sprocket, you stop the chain from moving. So that's the difference in the personal protective equipment there. So, in summary, I talked to you guys about different major components on the chainsaw. We talked about the 3 adjustments. We talked about some chainsaw maintenance. We discussed different troubleshooting steps, and we also talked about some chainsaw safety, and we watched a video on how dangerous chainsaws are. So the biggest thing that I've learned with working with chainsaws is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That applies for a lot of things that we do, but especially when it comes to working with chainsaws, there's no rush, and all your motions should be smooth and avoid hurting yourself or anyone else. Are there any questions? Or any comments or anything I can clarify?
Do you know? Go ahead, Kevin.
Have you heard anything about requirements to wear chaps, even in roof operations?
Well, I've never seen it be done on incidents that aren't training, just because of the way we respond. But I think it would be a good idea when operating with these machines to add that protective barrier because of the difference in turnout gear to chaps. Luckily for wildland firefighting, we always have our chaps on, but it does get fairly bulky when you have turnout gear and then chaps on. It's something I think we should look at.
I know that several departments in Washington State are beginning to.
Yeah,
It is coming.
definitely. And certainly when we're doing our daily checks, putting the chaps on over our turnout gear is very beneficial to us if we have them available. All right, so thank you guys for your time. I hope you guys learned something.